I thought I'd say it later. Not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, and not because the words felt unclear. They were already formed, quietly complete. I just assumed there would be another moment. A better one, a more appropriate time. Later felt safer. Later didn't require urgency. It didn't ask me to interrupt what was already happening. So I waited. At first it felt reasonable. The moment didn't seem fragile. It didn't appear as though it needed immediate attention. Everything around it felt stable. Conversation moved easily. The room felt settled. I told myself there was no harm in waiting. That timing matters. That saying the right thing at the wrong moment can make it lose its meaning. Later felt like patience, like restraint, like care. So I let the moment pass, trusting that it would return in another form. But moments don't always repeat themselves. This one didn't announce its departure. It didn't close the door behind it. It simply continued forward, becoming part of what had already happened. I remained where I was, watching the space adjust without resistance. The room didn't pause. It didn't look back. It learned how to continue, without needing what I hadn't said. I noticed how easily it worked, how naturally conversation reorganized itself around the voices that remained. There was no tension, no sense that something was missing, and that made waiting easier. Later still felt possible. I told myself I would recognize the right time, when it arrived, that there would be a clear opening, a pause long enough to step into, but later never arrived the way I expected. Time moved forward, carrying the moment further away. Each new exchange shifted the context slightly, changing what my words would mean. If I said them now, they didn't disappear. They just became harder to place. At some point, the words stopped feeling current. They belonged to an earlier version of the moment, one that no longer existed. Speaking now would have required explanation, not of what I wanted to say, but of why I hadn't said it before. That wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want the words to arrive carrying their own delay. So I waited again. Later became a habit, not a decision. Just a quiet assumption that there would always be another chance. The room continued to move. Voices overlapped. New topics replaced the old ones. I stayed aligned with the surface of things, listening, nodding, responding when it felt necessary. From the outside, nothing looked unusual. But inside, the words remained unused. I noticed how little effort it took for the moment to move on without them, how quickly the space adjusted. There was no resistance, no sign that anything needed to be resolved. Everything functioned, and because everything worked, there was no reason to interrupt it. Later felt justified. But later has a way of stretching itself. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It extends quietly, turning into something vague. Not now, not yet. Soon, until soon no longer refers to anything specific. I realized then that later isn't a place in time. It's a condition, a way of postponing presence, without having to refuse it outright. I wasn't choosing silence. I was choosing delay. And delay doesn't feel like absence at first. It feels temporary, but the longer it lasts, the more permanent it becomes. At some point, the moment no longer expected my words. Not out of rejection, not out of indifference, simply because it had already adjusted. The room had found its balance. Without them, speaking now would have felt late. Not wrong, just unnecessary, like adding a sentence after the meaning had already settled. So I didn't. I thought I'd say it later, but later never came. The moment didn't wait to be revisited. It didn't leave space behind. It became part of the past, without asking to be resolved. I noticed how quietly that happened. No signal, no closing gesture, just the calm realization that the opportunity had passed. I don't know what would have happened if I had spoken earlier, if I had said the words before later became the default. Maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe everything would have. There's no way to know. Later doesn't leave evidence behind. It doesn't explain what it cost. It simply moves the moment forward until there's nothing left to return to. I thought I'd say it later because later felt easier. It didn't require commitment. It didn't require presence. But ease has its own consequences. By the time I understood what later had taken with it, the moment no longer existed as something I could step into. It had already become memory. Quiet, unresolved, complete without me. I thought I'd say it later, and the world continued. adjusting effortlessly, learning how to move forward without what I had planned to say. By the time I realized there would be no later, the moment had already passed, and all that remained was the understanding that I had been waiting for a time that never arrived.